Oh, hi everyone. I want to talk about the internet propaganda, our fake problems, and our real problems. A lot of people can't distinguish these sort of things. Like, in a way, I'm an outsider trying to look into the inside of things. Of course, you have to be in positions of stature in society, which I am not. I'm just a simple produce clerk. But there are certain things that I understand and I interpret differently than other people because I was raised differently. I think differently, okay? Don't exactly ask me how that is, but I do. We've got some serious problems, and our leaders are more than willing to stab us in the back. And a lot of people aren't going to agree with what I got to say on certain aspects, just because of how they've been conditioned, the generation they live in, how they've been raised, how media and society has treated them through their early years until adulthood, and they just refuse to understand certain things. They have a mechanism in their head that prevents them from learning or preventing them from wanting to learn, which is fine. People have that right. We live in a country of free will, and I think that's a good thing. But if somebody wants to think outside the box, I think they should be able to. And I'm willing to provide my take on things. If people are interested in what I have to say, then all the power to them. Anyway, I live in Vancouver, BC, and I have noticed over the years that there's a lot of Asian people. And some people go, "Oh, you're a racist for pointing that out." No. I'm just stating something that is an actual fact. That there are a lot of Asians that live in this country, in particular in BC. I've never actually been to Toronto or any of those other places, so I don't know what their population density is there and all that firsthand. Cut me some slack, I'm just a country boy. But the problem is they have their pre-established beliefs on the world and how their parents conditioned them, just like how our parents conditioned us. And they have a different opinion on things such as, for example, the Vietnam War. Some people felt we had no business going there and all that. And I've explained in earlier videos that, look, the Chinese, the Russians, they wanted a proxy war. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. But I am going to talk about certain things that people overlook. Some people don't even know they exist. Because you ain't going to find no article on the internet, or especially not a video depicting exactly what's going on in a palatable manner to the simpleton, such as myself. Like, you got to spoon feed me this information for me to understand it. But things happened, and although Vietnam was 45 years ago, based on the feelings of certain individuals, mostly the people who are in higher stature, they have more power, and their underlings are limited in their intelligence, limited in their ability to understand things. That's how they're able to control them. That's how all powers of a certain country control their people. They dumb them down. They keep them ignorant. They exclude information and keep it to themselves so that the common person is unaware of certain things. They're unaware that they're getting a raw deal, that they're being betrayed in certain senses. Okay, I'm going to get back to Vietnam, okay? A lot of the soldiers that went in there were wound up too tight. They were too angry, they were just, little firecrackers. And that was exactly what they were meant to be. The problem with that is they're naive. They're ignorant of certain horrible things that could happen to them. And many horrible things did happen to American soldiers. I could state the obvious ones, like the bamboo torture under the fingernails. That would be very, very painful. I mean, one time I caught my finger in a door, and I thought that was painful. I mean, my nail ended up falling off, but really, it wasn't that bad. It's not like separating the fingernail from the flesh, and that's very painful. And they did other things too, like confine POW prisoners in small cages. And I'd had heard of a story where they had him in ankle deep water, or maybe it was neck deep, but the details are vague. And they released a bunch of rats in there, and the rats were gnawing at him, and it's just like, that sounds very, very horrible. And people go, well, those people who were doing that were the Vietnamese government, and they were protecting their people. But people who do vicious things like that to anybody, can they really be trusted governing a country? That's excluding the fact that the South Vietnamese government invited the Americans in to help them out. That's open to debate, which I'm not going to discuss right now. But I had heard of another one. And maybe it's just a jungle story. Maybe it's made up. But from how I heard it, entirely possible. Basically, Vietnam has a lot of leeches. Okay, you're in the jungle. Leeches are everywhere, and leeches are attracted to the crevices of the body. For whatever reason, I don't know exactly why. They just are. Maybe it's the warmth. Maybe who knows? I don't know. Okay, this is just what I heard. Anyway, I'd heard this more than once on a few different forums I've been on. They provided no evidence to support this, but I'm just saying that it's hypothetically possible that it could have occurred. And given the fact that the Viet Cong, or North Vietnamese Army, most like the Viet Cong, would create propaganda to discourage enemy soldiers from wanting to go and fight them, whether it being in their country, whether they came over here and we had to fight them over here. The point of their propaganda would be to discourage us from wanting to fight them because of the horrible things that could happen to us. I described a few of them already, but this one with the leeches, it's really creepy. You don't hear it very often. I had to delve deep into the internet to learn these little things, and I'd heard that a few American soldiers had their heads pried down so they'd have to look. And as I told you, leeches are attracted to crevices in the body. And they had the Viet Cong place leeches so that they would crawl up the pee hole of these American soldiers. And of course, when the leech gets up there, it's gonna hurt. a lot. And not to mention, looking down, seeing that, feeling that kind of pain, it's gonna scare you a lot. If you go into this country, and you may go, well, I'm a nice guy, I'm not gonna go in there, I'm not a soldier. Guess what? You ever heard of something called the draft? Draft can happen anytime, anywhere. If the government decides they need soldiers, it don't matter if you're a nice guy or not. If you're in their category of potential soldiers, they're going to grab you and make you do whatever they want you to do. And if they want you to go to a country like that, where that could potentially happen to you, that's scary. And I think that too many, well, especially Canadians, because I live in Canada, I know, are ignorant of this fact. They reinforce any bad talk about, well, I'm going to say specifically Asians, because they're the biggest minority, if you can call them a minority at this point. They're probably a majority, because you can't exactly trust the census to give you accurate information. Okay? Just look, see, observe everything. And I have. And I've happened to notice that most of the people with money happen to be Asians. They're the ones buying all the property. They're the ones in downtown buying all the expensive clothing. They're the ones buying the BMWs. Okay? It's not racist. I'm just pointing out something I've observed. Look, my opinion is, it's kind of like Attila the Hun. Anybody could be a Hun so long as they fought with the Huns and followed Hunnic leadership. And I look at it as the same way with whites. Anybody can join the white guy team so long as they help us out and support our leadership. I don't discriminate against that. If you're a reasonable person, then I ain't got a problem with you. Okay? Because, you know, it's true. White guys don't know everything. We're not always right. And if somebody can correct us in a palatable manner towards us, then I'm all for it. If they can point out things we've done wrong and how we could have done it better, then I'm all for it. But the problem is, the Canadian government is letting in too many Asian foreigners. And you might say, well, the white man's an immigrant to North America in the first place, which is true, but guess what? That's not the real issue. The real issue is we're letting in a bunch of immigrants that aren't white. Okay? So, like I said, if you support white leadership, perfectly okay. You're awesome in my book. But not all of them do that come into this country. Most of them are ignorant. They're too occupied in their studies, which, you know, can be complicated stuff like pharmaceutical or engineering or whatever. You know, it could be really occupying thoughts in your brain. But that's how they're isolated. That's how they're controlled, because that's their sphere of intellect, is in that knowledge that they've learned, and it's occupied all their time, and they can't see outside the other side parts of the world. Now look, I ain't never been to school. I completed high school, that's about it. Not much of an accomplishment, but in a way, my mind is more free than theirs. They may know more vocabulary than me. They may know things about the world I don't know. But I have the ability to think of ideas that they would not have thought of. And that's not to say I'm smart, because I really don't think I am. I think I have a lot of shortcomings, and I'm really disappointed with myself in some ways. But I do know certain things. I happen to know that not every Asian person knows all these horrible secrets about history. But our government has let some of them in. Some of them into our country who know these secrets, have the ability to manipulate propaganda if they had the opportunity. I'm sure they're being watched by our watchdogs who know how to manipulate propaganda as well. And there are certain mechanisms that keep them from doing such thing. But there are very evil people who live in this country. And you could be a poor sod. You work 5 days a week. Maybe you got to do a little bit of travel to do this work, so it adds on to it. Maybe with travel and work, you're working 55 hours a week or something like that. Like me, for example. You ain't got the time to study, watch the news, look up on internet sources, gather all this propaganda together, and discern what you think is real, what you don't think is real, what you want to believe, what you don't want to believe, and just compile it together and use logic and use deductive reasoning to better figure out your situation, better figure out what the real world is about. Okay? There are too many people who are on Facebook who saw a meme of Morpheus from The Matrix going, "What if I told you how to get to Sesame Street?" And they go, "Oh, whoa, man, that totally blew my mind." Poor simpleton. These things are meant to encourage thought, not solidify the thought of the meme. Okay? The thing is, the human race is evolving in its intellect, in its ability to understand things, but some people are lagging behind, and they don't think they look dumb, but they look dumb. Look, if somebody can dispute my points and say, "You're dumb," and explain to me why they're right and I'm wrong in a punctual, legitimate, and constructive manner, I can change my opinion based on new information. So feel free to leave some comments debunking what I've said. Look, okay, I've gone all over the page. I admit that. I do that sometimes. It's not that I go off on a tangent, but I start, to explain one subject, you have to get into another, and then sometimes you have to get into another to explain that subject, and things get confused. This was originally supposed to be about the Vietnam War. I started talking about how there are a lot of Asians in Vancouver, and although Vietnamese and Chinese are two different things, they're a stone's throw apart. They got a different language, but it's basically the same thing. Not to mention, they ain't got a border like Canada and the US has, where there's a fence and guys behind the fence with guns saying, no, you can't live here, no, you can't work here, and that kind of thing. It's just a jungle. Vietnam doesn't have the manpower to fully guard its borders. So the Chinese army can come in and out of there whenever it wants. What's to stop them? I mean, Vietnam's a little thin little country, and the thing about that is, maybe it's a cultural thing how the Chinese respect the Vietnamese because the Vietnamese have fought off so many enemies. They were involved in the proxy war with the United States 45 years ago. They did win some victories despite being the smaller military force, despite having a lower budget, despite being a third world country. So they earned a bit of respect. But the thing about politics is the Chinese government is so much bigger. Their military budget is so much bigger. They have a larger military. All they have to do is go with their thumb down on Vietnam, and Vietnam's toast. But it's with us in Canada and the US, the reason Canada and the US are separated is because of the allocation of resources. Divide and conquer. Basically, we're still tribesmen, just like the natives dominated North America before we came here. The only difference is, as I said, there's fences saying you can't live here, you can't work here, blah 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 blah. We have streets made of concrete, we have buildings made of concrete that we have to come to and go to. But based on people's limited intellect, we're still tribesmen. Like, you notice it from like little things, like business to business. Like if you're in a certain business, you don't like the business that your competition is, even though, what does it have to do with you? Not a lot. You can up and quit your business and go do something else if you want. Really complicated subject. I mean, I could blather on for hours and hours, but the thing is, I do try to keep my videos a little bit shorter because I know people, they got their lives to live. They don't want to sit in front of one particular video that they don't know right off the bat is going to be any good or not. They don't want to waste their time because there are a lot of videos that pretend they're good, and then you watch and you go, hey, wait a second, I didn't learn anything. So that's frustrating. So most people, it's a wise idea to try to keep your videos less than 5 minutes. That way people pay attention to it and they can go along with it and just watch it, and it's not a big commitment for them. But for me to properly explain things, look, sometimes with me you're going to need a little bit of patience. If you got the time, that's awesome. I'm saying things that I've noticed on my internet research, particularly on YouTube and things like that other people don't say. Well, maybe they do say it, but maybe they're as unpopular as I am. Maybe they just don't get the attention. Maybe YouTube's all about misleading information and stupid comedy and unintelligent debates and misleading information. Yeah, as I've said, gone all over the page over this. Look, the point is, our country is not as safe as some people think. Some people have a better understanding of this, and those people probably could explain it a heck of a lot better than I can. I mean, what do I know? I haven't seen any irrefutable evidence supporting my claims. I'm just using my deductive reasoning to come up with my conclusions. I think they're somewhat sound. Could be wrong. Somebody could agree with me and could totally debunk what I've got to say. But I relish the chance to debate somebody online. I gotta tell you, I've been waiting a long time for it. Because I gotta admit, whenever I post a comment on a YouTube video, or I post something on my Facebook, or I make a video or something like that, the lack of having an opponent to debate with bores me. It's like they're taking everything that I've got and they're giving nothing. So, I mean, I guess you can understand after a while, my point is that it gets a bit boring. Yeah. You know what? You know what this is like? My video? It's kind of like Legends with Sean Bean. It was an okay TV show. It got canceled. It was probably pretty annoying how they were not time traveling, but talking in one point of time and then reverting to another point in time, and they were constantly doing this, and unfortunately this is what my video was turned into, because I keep having to explain a point by explaining the point that explains that point. It's a brain cramp. No, my hair doesn't look good. I gotta fix that. Okay, relatively fixed. Anyway, spooky things have happened. We're not being told about this. In fact, it's deliberately being kept a secret. They aren't clever lies by our government. They're just use your logic. Think outside the box. And use deductive reasoning, and you can begin to understand that not only are these things possible, but they're probable, and if they didn't happen, like the leeches in the crotch thing that I talked about, they're gonna happen in the future, because the Vietnamese have had 40 years to think about all kinds of horrible ways of demoralizing our soldiers, and believe you me, there's a billion different ways to die, a billion different ways to suffer, and you don't want any of that. I am personally scared because, as I said, there are men of higher stature that know more things about the world, who are reasonable people, but they're evil. It's the evil of the world, the secrets of the world. And it's so overwhelming to the average mind of somebody who works, goes home, maybe goes to the movie theater and watches, I don't know, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. I want to see that movie, by the way. It could be cool. I don't know. I'll find out. Maybe they have a few beers. Maybe they watch a game of hockey or baseball. And that's their life. And the thing is, if you get all that summed up into a quick summary of those events, you can learn just about everything about that person without actually ever saying hello to them. Whereas, how are we going to learn about people of higher stature when they don't inform us on exactly what's going on? In fact, they keep their secrets to themselves, and what they do say is cryptic. It's vague and specific most of the time. Canadian news is an awesome example of that. It's just dumbed down and simplistic to the point where it just gets irritating. Like, I can only watch the news for like 5-10 minutes before I'm irritated with it. It's important to watch, so I stand it. I tolerate it. But you know, this internet, the propaganda, in a sense, a wheel of confusion to keep people from really understanding exactly what's going on. It's hard to break out of this mold. How to comprehend certain things that are simplistic to people who are privy to certain information. It doesn't make them smarter than you. It just makes them more well off, more informed than you are. It's a very confusing world we live in. It doesn't have to be that way. We could live in a society where people know what's going on, people know how to react to certain things, people don't get overexcited and act in rather rash manners, and they are able to act appropriately. Now, that may require some form of a dictatorship, which one could argue we were already in, but I'm having a major brain cramp here. I gotta admit, if I was born a few thousand years ago, the kind of guy I am, I would have been able to summon up an army by now. But right now I'm just a peon. I'm a pawn on a chessboard. I'm a nobody. But let me tell you one thing. If I ever won the lottery, Max, people with higher intellects would be attracted to me. They would acclimatize themselves to me. Because I'd be the big dumb idiot who does the talking. Because I'm the kind of guy who doesn't care if people hate him. I really don't. I could have 99% of the population hate me, and the 1% that likes me is the one with all the power. That wouldn't bother me at all. Oh, listen to me, I'm rambling. And for a long time, too. I gotta admit, this video, I really appreciate anyone who sat through the whole thing and showed some commitment. Because when you started watching the video, I don't know if you would have thought I'd be wasting your time, I was saying stupid stuff, I was irritating, or whatever. If you had the patience to sit through my video and listen to my rambling, then thank you. I really appreciate that. Just remember, sometimes I talk a little play on words, sometimes I exaggerate things, sometimes I go off in tangents. Just play with me, okay? Try to understand that I'm trying to offer an alternative mode of thinking, a way of debunking these so-called pseudo-intellectuals who think they know it all and are probably sponsored, and they're portraying a certain narrative, and I just want people to know that there's another option. Similar to how the Anonymous Mask does it, but the Anonymous Mask, as I said earlier, is just part of mainstream media to give people the illusion of being enlightened. This would be so much easier to explain had I gone to university or did some extra studying or whatever. Anyway, I have no idea how long I've talked for, so I'm going to leave this at that. I'll just sum up my points. The propaganda machine has a way of manipulating people's minds into believing certain things, and they will use rhetoric and their reasoning of right and wrong to convince people to go down a certain path. That much is obvious. And the thing about that is it makes them intolerant to the very thought of new ideas, or in my case, old ideas that have been forgotten. So it's almost like they're new ideas anyway, because this generation knows nothing about them. We weren't raised to understand this sort of stuff. Most of us, anyway. I want to discuss about the Vietnam War and how it's still significant today. It's still significant today because you get clues on social media and on the media. And Seven Psychopaths, there was a Vietnamese man who said that the war never ended. And it could be something as simple as that. One little clue in mainstream media, mainstream movies, that can describe a whole chain of reasoning. And when you think about it, the Vietnamese have every right to say the war didn't end because the war happened in Vietnam. Didn't happen in America. So, they go, we're going to come back for you. And perhaps we'll pick up some allies that can help us out, like China, for example. Now, Obama did say and did provide arms to Vietnam, but we have no idea what context that is. We don't know what kind of weapons he was giving to them. It could have been just weapons that the Chinese could have given them. We don't know. That's a piece of propaganda. We're not there. So we don't know. Yeah, that whole leech thing, it's gonna give me nightmares tonight when I go to sleep. It's 4:26 a.m. in the morning. I gotta go to work tomorrow. My brain's not running on full cylinders, unfortunately. I've said a whole different set of ideas. I'm not so good at compiling them into sets of information that I can describe distinctly in one video per topic. I've had to mash them all together for this video. It's very complicated for an uneducated illiterate. Oh, don't get me wrong, I can read, but like, you give me a book to read, I'll get bored easily. It's not interesting. So I'm a country bumpkin. Doesn't mean I'm dumb. Some people can call me dumb. Not gonna get offended. Just because you can't see evil people doesn't mean they don't exist. That's the other point I wanted to kind of emphasize on my closing argument, is that there are people who have understanding of the world, understanding of propaganda, understanding of mind control, who are not nice people. And they live within our society. You won't see them. They won't be dressed in a uniform, but they'll be there, and they'll be watching you, because it's important for them to know you so that they can better deconstruct you, tear apart your values, undermine your intelligence, and imply their will on you. With or without your consent, whatever. Sometimes they can manufacture consent and get you to think you agree with them, even though in the long run it ain't doing you no good. Anyway, damn, have I talked for a long time. And like I've said before, I'm all over the board. So, if you found me interesting to talk to, you're more than welcome to leave a comment in my inbox. If you didn't, if you only watched 20 seconds of my video, then I'm glad we live in a free country where you have the option to do that. Anyways, I better go to sleep. I'm starting to get a bit tired. So, see you guys later. Good day.